I was sure I heard a kid calling for help in my roommate's room, but he insisted it was just renovation sounds. When my roommate Terrence asked if I could help renovate the spare room, I told him I'd fractured my wrist from playing video games and couldn't help. He patted my shoulder and smiled. I totally understand, dude. Rest up. I got this. But you see, Terrence wasn't working on building a home office like he'd told me, but something so disturbing I never could have imagined it. Of course, I didn't know any of this at the time, so for 3 weeks I wore a fake sling while he worked on his project without a single complaint. But then I started catching things I couldn't really explain. At first it was just a receipt from Home Depot on the counter for heavy-duty rope and industrial zip ties along with the usual paint and lumber. When I asked about it, he said it was just for cable management, which made sense. He always had a reason for the things he bought, like the soundproofing foam so he wouldn't disturb me while he worked. He also bought a new smart lock to replace the door handle, but the side with the pin padlock was inside the room like he was trying to keep something in. Then one afternoon, I saw him carrying in a tiny elementary school desk and chair and setting it down in the room. When he stepped back out and saw me staring, he nervously smiled and explained, "I'm trying to get into product photography for children's toys." That same week while I was at Target looking for a new power bank, I spotted him in the kids' clothing aisle, filling his cart with small summer clothes. Short skirts, tank tops, long frilly socks, and even white cotton underwear. But I wasn't the only one feeling suspicious anymore. Terrence started asking me about my recovery timeline. He wanted to know when I'd be out for my doctor's appointments and whether the x-rays showed improvement. He started suggesting I leave. Maybe stay with parents for a week because rest and relaxation would speed up the healing process. I kept making excuses, hoping he'd drop it. When he realized I wasn't going anywhere, the renovation work moved to nighttime. That's when I started hearing the scratching sounds. After 3 sleepless nights hearing the scratching, I pulled out my phone and pressed record. I brought it up the next morning when Terrence woke up, but he just gave me a weird look. "Are you sure you heard something?" he asked. When I played the recording out for him, he rubbed at his chin, thinking, "Oh, you know what?" He said, "It might be because I kept leaving food inside the office. Sorry about that, bud. I promise. No more of that." But apparently that wasn't the only noise seeping through. My neighbor Susan texted me about a crying sound coming from our place whenever I left for work. "Are those kids okay?" she asked. I reminded her that we didn't have kids at our place, but then she sent me a photo of 2 kids, clearly looking out the window waving from the room. I finally decided to check what was going on with the renovation. Why did he need kids' clothes and the furniture? Why did he keep trying to get me out of the house? But when I walked toward the room, Terrence physically stepped in front of the door with his arms spread wide, grinning at me. "Wait, the renovation's not done. It's a surprise. I promise I'll show you." Just a few more days I waited until Terrence left to buy more of his product photography props before sneaking back to the room. I watched him lock the mysterious room and leave the key above the doorframe. My hands started shaking as I unlocked the deadbolt, then the doorknob, then slid the chain aside. At first glance, the room did look like a kindergarten classroom setup with a tiny mattress in the corner. But what stopped my heart were the 2 little girls standing on a stool, the older one holding the younger one up, both of them stretching toward the high window. When they heard me, they turned around with these hollow eyes. "Are you the sick one who lives outside?" the older one asked. "He told us to stay quiet for you. Are you better now? Can you help us go home? I don't want playtime with him anymore." I felt sick. I immediately started dialing 911 when I suddenly heard the front door slam. "Hey, buddy, ready for the surprise?" His voice freezes every muscle in my body, and the phone nearly slips from my shaking fingers. I jam it deep into my front pocket with the call still connected and spin toward the girls, pressing one finger hard against my lips in the universal sign for silence. The older girl clamps her hand over her sister's mouth, and they both go completely still like rabbits sensing a predator. My fake wrist throbs with phantom pain from 3 weeks of pretending, and I can feel my pulse hammering in my neck so hard it makes my vision blur at the edges. I force my legs to move and step out of the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind me but leaving it unlocked because there's no time to mess with all the chains and bolts. Terrence stands in the hallway with 2 paper shopping bags in his arms and that same friendly smile plastered across his face. But his eyes sweep past me to the door, and I watch them go cold and sharp when he spots the chain hanging loose and the deadbolt turned to the open position. He sets the bags down with careful, deliberate movements, and his smile doesn't change at all. But something in the air between us shifts like the moment before a dog decides to bite. His head tilts slightly, and he studies my face for 3 long seconds before speaking. "Hey, were you checking on my progress? How's that wrist feeling today, buddy?" The questions sound casual, but I can hear the test hidden underneath each word, like he's trying to figure out exactly what I know and what I've seen. I force my mouth into what I hope looks like an embarrassed grin and shrug with my good shoulder, letting out a nervous laugh that sounds fake even to my own ears. "Yeah, sorry, man. I know you wanted it to be a surprise, but I kept hearing these weird scratching sounds through the wall, and I got curious about what you were building in there. Thought maybe I could see the renovation draft before the big reveal, you know?" The lie tumbles out too fast, and I'm talking with my hands too much, gesturing toward the kitchen like an idiot. Actually, I'm super hungry right now. Want to grab some lunch together? There's that new sandwich place down the block we haven't tried yet. I take a step toward the kitchen, hoping he'll follow me away from that door and away from those girls hiding inside. Terrence picks up his shopping bags and moves after me, but his eyes keep sliding back to the room every few seconds, and that frozen smile never reaches the rest of his face. He starts unpacking groceries onto the counter with movements so slow and careful it makes my skin crawl, setting down each item like he's got all the time in the world. So when's your next doctor appointment? Did they say anything about the x-rays showing improvement? I was thinking maybe your parents might want you to come stay with them for a bit. You know, get some rest. And proper care. Every question lands like a punch, and I can feel him watching my reactions, measuring my answers against something in his head. The phone sits heavy in my front pocket, and I pray the dispatcher is still there listening to every word, recording this whole twisted conversation. I mumble something vague about the appointment being next week and my parents being busy with work, trying to sound normal while my brain screams at me to run or fight or do something other than stand here unpacking groceries with a monster. Terrence stops moving in the middle of reaching for a box of pasta, and his whole body goes still like he's listening for something. The apartment is way too quiet, and we both know it because those girls aren't making a single sound, and there's no TV or music playing to cover the silence. His hand drops from the pasta and moves slowly toward the doorframe where he always keeps that key, and I watch his shoulders shift from friendly roommate posture into something tight and dangerous like a cat about to pounce. We end up in this bizarre standoff in the hallway with both of us sort of hovering near the locked room, but neither one of us saying anything about why we're standing here. He's positioned himself between me and the front door while pretending to organize a pile of renovation supplies he left stacked against the wall, moving them around without any real purpose. I'm trying to stay between him and the room where those girls are pressed against the far wall, praying I can protect them, and my mind races through options that all seem terrible. A tiny scuffing sound comes from inside the room, just the smallest scrape of a shoe against the floor, but Terrence's head snaps toward it so fast I actually flinch backward. His fake smile disappears completely, and for the first time I see his real face, the one he's been hiding under all that friendly roommate garbage for months. He's doing math in his head right now, calculating whether he should rush into that room or try to talk his way through this situation, and I realize with sick certainty that he's deciding whether to hurt me. His hand reaches up toward the key above the doorframe, while his other hand waves casually in the air like everything is totally normal. You know what? I'll just show you the surprise right now since you're so curious about it. His voice has gone completely flat and empty, stripped of all the fake warmth he usually puts into it. I take a step backward, and my hand fumbles behind me along the wall, searching for anything heavy or sharp I could use as a weapon if this goes bad. My fingers brush against a picture frame, but it's screwed into the wall and won't budge. The room spins slightly, and I grab at the wall to steady myself, using the motion to pull my phone halfway out of my pocket and tap the screen blind, praying I can hit the speaker button. I stumble against the wall harder than I meant to and let out a cough that sounds forced even to me. The dispatcher's tiny voice cuts through the silence asking if I'm in danger, and I cough again louder to cover the sound. But Terrence freezes with the key in his hand, and his eyes lock onto my pocket where the phone is. He stares at my face for what feels like an hour, and I can practically see the gears turning in his brain as he tries to figure out if I'm actually sick or playing some kind of game with him. His expression shifts through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds and settles on this fake concern that makes my stomach turn. Hey, buddy, are you okay? You don't look so good. The words come out in this voice that sounds nothing like him, all syrupy and worried like he actually cares whether I'm dying right here in the hallway. We're both completely frozen in this horrible moment where everything could go either way, and I can feel the weight of what happens next pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. I jam my foot against the doorframe and my mouth starts running before my brain catches up, words spilling out about wanting to capture this moment for Instagram, about how cool the renovation looks, about needing content for my followers. My phone comes out of my pocket with shaking hands, and I hold it up like I'm actually going to film something while Terrence's eyes narrow, and his jaw does this tight thing where I can see the muscles working under his skin. He slides the key into the lock anyway, and I watch his fingers turn it with this slow, deliberate motion, like he's already planning what story he'll tell me about whatever I'm about to see. The door swings open, and my eyes go straight to the back wall, where both girls are pressed flat against the soundproofing foam, with their arms wrapped around each other, and their faces showing this blank, empty terror that makes my stomach drop. Terrence steps inside the room, and his whole body language shifts into something that makes my skin crawl, because suddenly he's using this high, sweet voice that doesn't match his face at all. He's making these cooing sounds and holding out his hands to the girls, telling them to come say hello to his friend, to show me how good they've been, to demonstrate the fun games they've been playing together. The older girl's mouth opens, but nothing comes out, and the younger one starts crying silently with tears just running down her cheeks, and no sound at all. I'm standing in the doorway with my phone still up, and Terrence glances back over his shoulder at me, and whatever was in his expression before just vanishes completely and gets replaced by something flat and dead, like looking into the eyes of a shark. The older girl's whisper cuts through the room asking if I'm the sick one who lives outside, and my throat closes up. Because I realize these kids have been told about me, have been kept quiet because of my fake injury, have been trapped here partly because I was too lazy and scared to ask real questions. The words come out of my mouth in this panicked rush about how the neighbors already called the cops about all the noise, and they're probably on their way right now, and maybe we should all just wait outside for them to arrive. It's complete garbage, and we both know it, but Terrence's whole body goes rigid like someone just ran electricity through him, and his hand curls into a fist so tight I can see his knuckles going white. His eyes dart from me to the girls to the door and back again, and I can practically see him doing calculations in his head about whether he has time to hurt someone before sirens arrive, about whether he can silence everyone in this room and run, about which option gives him the best chance of getting away with whatever he's been doing here for weeks. His breathing gets faster, and his weight shifts forward onto the balls of his feet, and I know with absolute certainty that he's about to do something horrible. The door slams shut so hard the whole frame shakes, and suddenly his hand is clamped around my upper arm with a grip that sends shooting pain down to my elbow. His voice comes out completely flat and emotionless, telling me to sit on the couch right now and not move, and not make another sound. I try to twist away, but his fingers dig in harder, and he's way stronger than I ever realized during all those months of living together and playing video games and pretending everything was normal. He drags me toward the living room, and my feet scramble against the floor trying to find purchase, but he just keeps pulling, and my shoulder feels like it's going to pop out of the socket. I manage to angle my body so my mouth is pointing down toward my pocket, and I whisper our full address and apartment number as clearly as I can without moving my lips too much. My free hand fumbles for the phone and hits the speaker button, and the dispatcher's voice comes through asking me to confirm the emergency and requesting I state my location again for the responding units. Terrence freezes mid-step, and his face goes completely white like all the blood just drained out of it, and then floods back red with this rage that makes him look like someone I've never seen before. His grip on my arm tightens even more, and I feel something pop in my shoulder that sends white-hot pain shooting down my spine. He moves fast to block the front door and positions himself between me and the only exit, and I realize he's completely trapped now with police coming and 2 kidnapped children locked in his apartment and evidence scattered everywhere. My eyes scan the living room and land on a heavy bookend shaped like a horse that's sitting on the side table within arm's reach. My fake injured wrist is moving normally now, and Terrence's eyes follow my movement and land on my perfectly functional hand, and I watch his expression shift as he puts together that I've been lying about everything for weeks. I grab the coffee mug off the side table and hurl it at the wall as hard as I can, and it explodes into ceramic shards with a crash that echoes through the whole apartment. I sprint for the hallway, hoping the noise will bring neighbors, or at least create enough chaos that I can get to the front door. Terrence lunges after me, and his hand catches the fake sling that's still dangling from my shoulder by one strap. The fabric rips completely off, and we both stare at my perfectly mobile wrist for this frozen second where everything stops. His face twists into something ugly, and his voice comes out calling me a lying piece of garbage and asking how long I've been faking and whether I thought this was funny. He shoves me hard into the wall, and my head bounces off the plaster, and I taste blood where my lips split against my teeth. The pain is sharp and immediate and spreads across my whole face in this hot wave that makes my eyes water. I start screaming at the top of my lungs, but instead of help, I yell fire over and over because somewhere in the back of my panicked brain, I remember reading that people respond faster to fire than to someone calling for help. Susan's voice comes through the shared wall asking what the hell is happening over there and whether she needs to call someone. Terrence's grip on my shirt loosens just slightly as he tilts his head listening for sirens in the distance. I can see his eyes darting around trying to calculate his next move while his breathing comes fast and shallow. Susan starts pounding on the wall now, and her voice gets louder, saying she's calling the police right now and we better not be doing something stupid over there. I yell back through the wall that there are kids in danger and she needs to tell the police it's an emergency and give them our exact unit number. Terrence looks between me and the front door like a trapped animal that's run out of options and is trying to decide whether to fight or hide. His hand drops from my shirt, and he backs up a step with his eyes still locked on mine, and his chest heaving with these rapid breaths that sound almost like sobs. The wail of sirens cuts through the air, getting louder by the second, and Terrence's fingers go slack around my shirt collar. I watch his face cycle through emotions in fast forward, denial, then panic, then this awful acceptance that makes his shoulders drop. He takes a step back from me, and then another, his eyes darting between me and the locked room like he's doing math in his head about whether he can get inside and barricade himself before the cops break down the door. His feet shuffle backwards down the hallway, and I see him reaching for the doorframe where the key sits, and that's when I move. I sprint past him toward the bathroom at the end of the hall and slam the door so hard the frame shakes, fumbling with the lock until it clicks into place. My hands won't stop shaking as I pull out my phone and try to open the text thread with 911, but my fingers keep hitting the wrong letters. I have to delete and retype our unit number twice because my hands are trembling so bad the letters blur together. The dispatcher's response comes through immediately asking me to confirm my location and describe the immediate threat. I text back that the suspect is trying to get to the room where the children are locked and that I'm hiding in the bathroom. She replies telling me to stay on the line and keep the door locked and that officers are less than 2 minutes out. My phone buzzes with another message asking me to describe the suspect's appearance and whether I've seen any weapons in the apartment. I type out Terrence's height and build and hair color, adding that I haven't seen guns or knives, but there are zip ties and restraints in the locked room. The dispatcher texts back telling me I'm doing great and to stay hidden until officers secure the scene. I can hear Terrence moving around in the hallway, and then his footsteps stop right outside the bathroom door. His voice comes through the wood trying to sound calm and normal, but there's this crack in it that makes my skin crawl. He says this is all a big misunderstanding and the girls are his nieces, and I'm making a huge mistake that's going to ruin his life over nothing. The word nieces comes out strangled, and I hear him start to cry, or maybe hyperventilate on the other side of the door. He's begging now, saying I need to tell the police when they get here that this was just a surprise party setup that went wrong and the girls are family. His fist pounds once on the door, making me jump back even though the lock is solid. Then he switches tactics and his voice goes softer, more reasonable, like he's explaining something simple to a child. He spins this whole story about how the girls are his sister's kids, and she asked him to watch them for a few weeks as a favor while she dealt with some personal stuff. The locks were for their safety, he says, to keep them from wandering out while he was at work. He keeps talking through the door, saying the soundproofing was so they could play and watch movies without disturbing me during my recovery. Every word makes my stomach turn, because I can hear him convincing himself as he talks. Like if he says it enough times, it'll become true. He tells me I'm overreacting because I listen to too many true crime podcasts, and I've let my imagination run wild with something innocent. He swears he would never hurt children, and this whole thing is going to be cleared up as soon as the police talk to his sister and verify everything. The sirens are right outside our building now. So close I can hear them through the bathroom window, and Terrence's voice cuts off mid-sentence. His footsteps run back down the hallway toward the locked room, and I hear rattling as he tries to get the door open fast. Metal scrapes against metal, and he's cursing under his breath, struggling with the deadbolt. Heavy boots pound up the stairwell, and a deep voice shouts for police and demands someone open the door. I crack the bathroom door open just an inch and peek through the gap into the hallway. Officers are announcing themselves again with this authority that makes the whole apartment shake, and through the narrow opening I can see Terrence standing frozen in the middle of the hallway. He's looking back and forth between the locked room and the front door like his brain can't process which direction to run. His whole body seems to deflate and get smaller as reality crashes down on him that there's nowhere left to go. I push the bathroom door open wider and stumble out into the hallway on legs that feel like rubber. My hands are still shaking as I reach for the front door and unlock the deadbolt and chain and swing it open. 3 officers are standing there in uniform with hands near their weapons, and I immediately start pointing down the hallway toward the locked room. The words tumble out of my mouth too fast, telling them there are 2 little girls inside, and the key is above the doorframe, and the suspect is right there in the hallway. The lead officer holds up one hand, telling me to step back and stay by the door, while his partner moves toward Terrence with his hand resting on his weapon. I'm talking even faster now, giving them the quickest summary I can about finding the girls and calling 911 and where all the evidence is. The officers order Terrence to get down on the ground right now, but he starts arguing in this high, panicked voice about his rights and warrants. He says this is his private room, and they can't enter without his permission, and he knows his rights. One of the officers cuts him off, saying they have exigent circumstances with endangered children, and he needs to comply immediately, or they will use force. Terrence takes a step toward the locked room like he's going to make one last attempt to get inside, and that's when the officers move in fast. They take him down in one smooth motion that looks practiced, getting him face down on the floor with his arms pulled behind his back. The handcuffs click into place within seconds, and Terrence is crying now, actually sobbing and shouting about false accusations and how this is all a mistake. The officers pat him down, checking for weapons, while he keeps yelling that I'm lying and he's innocent and they're going to regret this. I press myself flat against the wall, watching the whole scene unfold like I'm watching it happen to someone else on TV, instead of standing right here in my own hallway. One officer keeps a knee on Terrence's back, while another retrieves the key from above the doorframe, and a third one radios for backup and medical to check on the children. More officers crowd up the stairs in heavy boots and tactical vests, filling the narrow hallway with radio static and urgent voices coordinating positions. One of them retrieves the key from above the doorframe where I showed them earlier and approaches the locked door with careful movements. He calls through the wood in a gentle voice, telling the girls inside that police are here to help and they need to come to the door slowly. I hear shuffling sounds and whispered voices from inside the room. Then the older girl responds in a shaky voice asking if the bad man is gone. The officer confirms Terrence is in custody, and they're safe now, then slides the key into the deadbolt and turns it with a metallic click. The door swings open, revealing the tiny space with its elementary school furniture and thin mattress, and the 2 girls stand pressed against the far wall, holding hands. The older one steps forward first, her grip tight on her little sister's hand, and a female officer immediately drops to one knee at their eye level. She introduces herself as Officer Delgado and asks their names in this warm voice that somehow doesn't sound fake despite everything. Paramedics appear at the top of the stairwell carrying medical bags and speaking in calm tones, and they wrap both girls in those crinkly emergency blankets that look like aluminum foil. The younger girl starts crying when the paramedic kneels down to check her pulse. Not scared crying, but this exhausted sobbing like she's been holding it in forever. They do quick medical checks right there in the hallway, shining lights in the girl's eyes and asking questions about pain or injuries, while more officers document everything with cameras and notepads. The older girl keeps looking at me standing uselessly against the wall, and finally asks if I'm really the sick one who lived outside their room. I nod because I can't form words around the lump in my throat, and she says they had to stay so quiet during the day because he told them I needed rest to get better. An officer with gray hair and kind eyes guides me away from the hallway chaos to the living room couch, his hand light on my shoulder. He sits across from me with a notepad and pen, introducing himself as Officer Avery, and explaining he needs my statement about what I found and when. I start talking, and my voice sounds weird and distant, like someone else is speaking through my mouth, explaining the 3 weeks of renovation work and how I wore a fake sling the whole time. I tell him about the Home Depot receipt with rope and zip ties, the soundproofing foam, the smart lock installed backwards with the keypad facing inside. My hands shake as I describe seeing Terrence at Target filling a cart with small summer clothes and children's underwear, and how he always had explanations that almost made sense in the moment. Officer Avery writes everything down without judgment on his face, but I can feel the unasked question hanging between us about why I waited so long. I explain about Susan's text messages showing crying sounds and the photo of kids waving from the window and how I finally decided to check the room today when Terrence left for the store. The officer asks what time I entered the room and what exactly the girls said to me, so I repeat the older girl's words about being quiet for the sick one and not wanting playtime anymore. Officer Avery's pen pauses on the notepad for just a second when I say playtime, then he keeps writing in steady strokes. He asks if I'm willing to provide my phone as evidence and come to the station later for a formal recorded statement, and I agree immediately because it's literally the least I can do after 3 weeks of willful blindness. Detective Maxwell Bishop arrives about an hour later wearing plain clothes instead of a uniform, dark jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He's maybe 40 years old with tired eyes that look like they've seen way too much darkness in this world, and he introduces himself as the lead investigator on the case. He sits down across from me in the same spot Officer Avery occupied earlier and asks me to walk him through the entire timeline starting from when Terrence first mentioned the renovation project. His questions are super specific, asking exact dates and times, wanting to know the order things appeared and how Terrence acted each time. I explain about faking the wrist injury 3 weeks ago to avoid helping with the work, and I watch Detective Bishop's expression stay neutral, but his eyes sharpen slightly. He asks why I maintained the fake injury for so long, and I admit I was lazy and didn't want to help with manual labor. The detective presses on each suspicious purchase, asking what I thought at the time and why I accepted Terrence's explanations. Every time I hesitate or look away while answering, he seems to notice, making a small note in his pad. I tell him about Terrence asking about my doctor appointments and suggesting I stay with my parents for rest, how the work moved to nighttime when I wouldn't leave. Detective Bishop leans forward slightly when I mention the scratching sounds I recorded, and he asks if I still have that audio file. I pull out my phone with shaking hands and show him the recording from 3 nights ago, the faint scraping sounds that Terrence blamed on leaving food in the room. I hand over my phone completely, letting Detective Bishop scroll through everything I photographed and saved over the past few weeks. He finds the picture I took of the Home Depot receipt showing heavy-duty rope and industrial zip ties, along with the regular renovation supplies. I pull up Susan's text messages about hearing crying sounds during the day, and the photo she sent showing 2 small faces visible in the window. Detective Bishop bags my phone methodically in a clear evidence bag, writing case numbers and timestamps on the label. A crime scene tech in a white jumpsuit appears from the hallway carrying a camera with a massive lens, and she starts photographing the room from every possible angle. The detective asks if I'm willing to come to the station later this week for a formal recorded statement that could be used in court, and I say yes without hesitation. He explains the process will be more detailed and potentially difficult, asking me to relive everything multiple times. I tell him I'll answer any questions he has because those girls deserve justice, even if it makes me look terrible. Detective Bishop studies my face for a long moment, then nods and says someone from the prosecutor's office will contact me about scheduling. A woman in professional clothes steps through the apartment door, her badge clipped to her belt and a folder tucked under her arm. She introduces herself as Layla Qualls from Child Protective Services and explains she's assuming emergency custody of both girls effective immediately. Her voice is calm, but there's steel underneath it, the tone of someone who has seen awful things and refuses to become numb to them. She asks me gentle questions about what the older girl said when I first opened the door, wanting exact words if I can remember them. I repeat the questions about whether I was the sick one who lived outside, about wanting to go home, about not wanting playtime anymore. Layla's face tightens when I say playtime, her jaw clenching for just a second before she smooths her expression back to professional concern. She asks if I heard the girls mention any family members or where they're from originally, and I shake my head feeling useless. I explain they only asked about me and going home, Nothing specific about parents or addresses. Layla makes notes in her folder and says the girls will be placed in an emergency foster home together while CPS works to identify them and locate their families. She thanks me for calling 911 when I did, her words careful and measured, and I can't tell if she means it or if she's thinking about all the days I didn't call. Through the living room window, I spot neighbors standing on the sidewalk below with their phones held up, filming everything. A white van with a satellite dish parks at the curb, and a woman in business clothes climbs out holding a microphone. Another news van pulls up behind it, and I watch reporters setting up cameras aimed at our building entrance. My stomach drops as I realize this is going to be everywhere online within hours, my face probably already captured in someone's shaky phone video. I pull out my own phone to check social media and immediately see a short clip posted by someone in the building across the street. The caption reads, "Rescue operation in progress," with a bunch of shocked face emojis, and the video shows police cars with flashing lights and officers escorting the girls wrapped in blankets toward an ambulance. The comments are already filling up with people asking what happened and speculating about details nobody knows yet. Someone has tagged the location, and now hundreds of people are watching and sharing and discussing. I feel sick knowing that within hours, everyone will be asking why the roommate didn't notice anything, why nobody reported suspicious activity sooner, why it took so long for someone to check that locked room. Crime scene techs move through the apartment in white suits and gloves, photographing and measuring and bagging evidence with careful precision. One of them focuses on documenting the inside-facing keypad lock, taking close-up shots from multiple angles that show clearly how the numbers face inward. Another tech photographs the heavy-duty zip ties still in their packaging, the industrial strength that could restrain an adult, let alone a small child. They document the elementary school furniture, the tiny desk and chair that Terrence claimed were for product photography. Bags of children's clothing get photographed with the tags still attached, price stickers from Target visible on the plastic. Detective Bishop follows them through the room, asking me detailed questions about when each item appeared, and I have to admit I saw most of this stuff weeks ago. The soundproofing foam on the walls gets special attention, the tech measuring its thickness and noting how it covers every surface. Each piece of evidence is another reminder that I saw these things and did nothing, that I accepted flimsy explanations and went back to my video games. Detective Bishop asks if Terrence ever prevented me from entering the room, and I explain about him physically blocking the door and asking me to wait for the surprise reveal. The detective makes a note and asks why I didn't find that behavior suspicious enough to investigate sooner. Down on the street, I hear shouting and look out the window to see them loading Terrence into the back of a police cruiser. His hands are cuffed behind his back and two officers guide him by the arms, but he's twisting around trying to look up at our apartment. His voice carries up through the open window, loud and desperate, screaming that I knew what he was doing the whole time. He shouts that I'm just as guilty because I helped him by staying out of the way and keeping my mouth shut. The words echo off the buildings as he calls me a coward who only called police when I got caught snooping in his private business. Officers try to duck his head down into the cruiser, but he keeps yelling, his face red and twisted with rage. He screams that I saw everything and did nothing, that I wore a fake sling for weeks while he worked, that I'm a liar trying to save myself now. The officers finally get him into the back seat and slam the door, cutting off his voice mid-sentence. But the words echo in my head even after the cruiser pulls away with lights flashing, because everything he said is basically true, even if his reasons were evil. Susan appears at my apartment door looking pale and shaken, her arms wrapped around herself. She asks quietly why I didn't do something when she texted me about the crying sounds weeks ago. Her voice isn't angry or accusing, just confused and sad, like she genuinely doesn't understand my inaction. I open my mouth to explain, but nothing comes out that sounds like a good reason, and we both know it. She says she really hopes the girls will be okay after everything they went through, and that she already told the police she's available anytime they need her statement. I can see the question in her eyes about why it took a neighbor to notice and report when I lived right here the whole time. Susan shifts her weight from foot to foot, clearly wanting to say more but holding back, and the silence between us feels heavy with all the things neither of us wants to acknowledge out loud. I force myself to speak even though the words taste bitter, telling Susan I was scared and stupid and convinced myself there had to be some reasonable explanation for everything. I admit I kept hoping the suspicious things would turn out to be innocent, so I wouldn't have to confront Terrence or get involved. My voice cracks as I apologize for not taking her concerns seriously when she first reached out, for dismissing her text about crying sounds like it was nothing. Susan nods slowly and says she gets being afraid of confrontation, but those girls were afraid too, and they didn't have a choice about their situation. Her words hit like a punch because she's right and there's no arguing with it. I promise her I'm going to tell the police everything, including all the times I ignored obvious warning signs and accepted lazy excuses. I say I'll testify or give statements or whatever they need, that I won't try to minimize my part in letting this continue for weeks. Susan reaches out and squeezes my shoulder briefly, her touch gentle despite everything, then turns and walks back to her own apartment without another word. That evening, I sit across from Detective Bishop in a small interview room at the police station with a camera mounted in the corner recording everything. He's professional and direct. Not unkind, but definitely not warm either. He asks why I didn't report the suspicious purchases from Home Depot when I first saw the receipt for heavy-duty rope and industrial zip ties. I try to explain about the fake injury and wanting to avoid conflict, about how Terrence always had explanations that seemed almost reasonable in the moment. My voice sounds weak even to my own ears. The detective asks about the inside-facing lock and why that didn't trigger alarm bells. I admit I noticed it was weird, but convinced myself there was some logical reason I wasn't thinking of. He writes something in his notepad, and I wonder if he's noting how pathetic my answers sound. Then he asks about the children's clothing I saw Terrence buying at Target. I explain I thought maybe he had nieces or was doing some kind of charity donation. The detective's pen stops moving and he looks at me with this expression that isn't angry but feels worse somehow. He asks why I didn't connect the dots between the clothes, the furniture, the locks, and the soundproofing. I don't have a good answer because there isn't one. Detective Bishop presses harder on why I didn't act when Susan sent me the photo of kids in the window. That's when I have to admit I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of confrontation, afraid Terrence would get mad at me if I accused him of something horrible. Saying it out loud makes me realize how pathetic it sounds compared to what those girls went through. I was worried about an awkward conversation while they were locked in that room. Detective Bishop's expression doesn't change, but I can feel his judgment radiating across the table. He asks if I understand that my inaction allowed the situation to continue for additional weeks. I say yes, because what else can I say? He slides a formal statement across the table, and I read through everything I saw and failed to report. My signature at the bottom feels like signing a confession. Detective Bishop hands me a card for a victim advocate and says someone will contact me about the ongoing investigation. He mentions I might need to testify eventually and asks if I'm willing to cooperate fully. I say yes immediately, because it's literally the least I can do after letting those girls suffer while I played video games 20 feet away. He stands and thanks me for coming in, then adds that I should expect follow-up questions as the investigation continues. I walk out of the police station feeling hollowed out and sick. My phone rings around midnight while I'm lying awake in bed staring at the ceiling. It's Layla Qualls from CPS calling to update me that both girls have been medically examined and placed in an emergency foster home together. Her voice is calm and professional as she explains they're physically okay, but will need extensive therapy. Then she mentions the older girl asked if the sick one was the person who finally helped them leave. Layla says she wanted me to know the girls don't blame me, even though maybe they should. I thank her for the update and she says she'll be in touch if they need anything else from me. After we hang up, I sit there holding my phone, wondering how those girls cannot blame me when I blame myself for everything. The next morning, I force myself to return to the apartment to grab clothes and essentials. Crime scene tape is still stretched across the doorway to that room, and the whole place feels contaminated now. Everything looks smaller and more pathetic than I remembered. I stuff things randomly into a duffel bag while trying not to look at the door that was locked for weeks while I sat on that couch playing games. My hands shake as I pack toiletries and grab my laptop charger. The apartment that felt like home yesterday now feels like a crime scene I'm complicit in. I'm shoving shirts into the bag when my phone rings. It's the property manager calling to inform me the apartment is part of an active crime scene and I need to relocate during the investigation. She's sympathetic but firm about the timeline. I ask about breaking the lease early, and she says we can work something out given the circumstances. She doesn't say it, but I can hear the unspoken part about how they want me out anyway. I realize I'm losing my housing because I was too lazy and cowardly to help 2 kidnapped children. Later that afternoon, my boss sends a carefully worded email about the company's media policy after someone recognizes our building in the news clip that's spreading online. HR wants to schedule a call to discuss the situation. I can read between the lines that they're worried about publicity and whether I'm a liability now. The email uses phrases like maintaining professional standards and protecting company reputation. I respond saying I'm available whenever they want to talk and feel my stomach drop thinking about losing my job on top of everything else. Then my phone rings again, and it's a woman introducing herself as ADA Cynthia Rich, the prosecutor handling Terrence's case. She wants to schedule a preparation meeting to go over my potential testimony. Her voice is businesslike but not unkind as she outlines potential charges including kidnapping, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. She mentions I'll likely be questioned about my timeline and observations during any trial. I agree to meet with her next week, and she says her office will send details. After the call ends, I sit there feeling the weight of everything crashing down at once. I check into a cheap motel with my hastily packed bag and spend the first night unable to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those girls standing on that stool reaching for the window. Around 3 in the morning, I have a full panic attack with chest pain and hyperventilating so bad I think I'm dying. The front desk clerk hears me through the thin walls and knocks asking if I need an ambulance. I manage to gasp out that I'm okay and spend the next hour doing breathing exercises I find on my phone. In the morning, I call my insurance's employee assistance program with shaking hands. The intake coordinator asks basic questions about my mental state and whether I'm safe. I tell her I'm not going to hurt myself, but I need help processing what happened. She gets me scheduled with someone named Lewis Sumner, who has experience with trauma and guilt. The appointment is for that same afternoon. I feel pathetic needing therapy when I'm not even the real victim here, but I book it anyway because I can't keep having panic attacks in motel rooms. The therapist's office sits in a boring medical building with beige walls and motivational posters about growth and healing. Lewis opens the door himself instead of having a receptionist, which makes it feel less clinical somehow. He shakes my hand with a firm grip and guides me to a chair that's comfortable but not too soft. His office has plants on the windowsill and books stacked everywhere, the kind of space that feels lived in rather than staged. He asks me to tell him what brought me here, and I start with the panic attack but end up spilling everything about the girls in the room and my fake injury. Lewis listens without interrupting, nodding occasionally but mostly just letting me talk until I run out of words. When I finally stop, he leans forward slightly and asks what I plan to do with all this guilt I'm carrying around. The question catches me off guard because I expected him to tell me it wasn't my fault or that I did the best I could. Instead, he says guilt can either eat me alive uselessly or turn into something that drives meaningful change, and I get to choose which one. We spend the next 40 minutes working through the difference between beating myself up as punishment versus taking real accountability that leads to different choices. He makes me write down specific actions I can take moving forward instead of just drowning in regret. By the end, I still feel terrible, but slightly less like I'm being pulled underwater by weights I can't escape. Lewis schedules me for weekly sessions and says this is going to be hard work, but avoiding it will be harder. I drive back to the motel feeling wrung out but weirdly lighter, like maybe I can survive this after all. The preliminary hearing happens 5 days later, and I show up early to the courthouse, going through security with shaking hands. The public gallery fills with reporters and curious people who heard about the case on the news. I take a seat in the back row where I can see everything but hopefully stay invisible. The bailiff brings Terrence in through a side door, and my stomach lurches when I see him. He's wearing an orange jumpsuit that hangs loose on his frame, and his hands are cuffed to a chain around his waist. He looks smaller than I remember, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble covering his jaw. His public defender is a tired-looking woman in a rumpled suit who's probably handling 20 other cases this week. Terrence shuffles to the defense table and his eyes scan the courtroom like he's looking for someone. When his gaze lands on me, I force myself not to look away, even though everything in me wants to hide under the bench. We lock eyes for maybe 3 seconds, and I see something flicker across his face. Anger or betrayal, or maybe just calculation. I keep staring back until he finally looks away first. The judge enters and everyone stands. Then the hearing begins with the prosecutor outlining the charges. Terrence's lawyer stands up and argues this whole thing is a tragic misunderstanding about family childcare that went wrong due to miscommunication. She says Terrence was watching his nieces as a favor to his sister, who was dealing with a family emergency, and the unusual setup was temporary. Her voice has this rehearsed quality like she's reading from a script she doesn't quite believe. She requests reasonable bail so Terrence can await trial at home, where he can prepare his defense properly. The prosecutor stands up next, and her voice cuts through the courtroom with sharp precision. She presents photos of the inside-facing lock, the restraints still in packaging, the soundproofing materials. She reads statements from the girls about not wanting playtime anymore and asking to go home. She mentions the surveillance equipment found on Terrence's laptop and search histories that paint a disturbing picture. The judge listens with an expression that gives nothing away, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When both sides finish their arguments, the judge sets bail at $500,000 and remands Terrence to county jail pending trial. Terrence's shoulders slump when he hears the amount, and I know he can't afford it. I feel relief wash through me, but no satisfaction, just exhaustion, and the knowledge that this is only the beginning. 2 days after the hearing, Cynthia Rich calls and asks me to come to her office for a preparation session. Her office is cluttered with case files and coffee cups, photos of her kids on the desk beside stacks of legal documents. She walks me through what testifying will be like if this goes to trial, the questions I'll face from both sides, the pressure of speaking in front of a jury. She warns me the defense will attack my credibility hard by highlighting the fake injury and my failure to report suspicious activity earlier. They'll try to paint me as either complicit or willfully blind. Maybe both. She says I need to be completely honest about my mistakes while clearly describing what I observed and when. Her voice is kind but firm when she tells me juries understand fear and manipulation, but I have to own my part in this. We spend 3 hours going over potential questions and practicing my answers until my head pounds. She reminds me this isn't about making me look good, it's about telling the truth in a way that helps those girls get justice. I leave her office feeling prepared but also terrified about facing a courtroom full of people judging every word I say. That same night, the news clip from Susan goes viral on social media, and suddenly, everyone has an opinion about what happened. People share it with captions speculating about details and arguing in the comments about how this could have been prevented. Someone screenshots part of the video where you can see our building number, and within hours, people have figured out my name from public records. Strangers start leaving comments on my old posts calling me complicit or worse, saying I should be charged too for enabling what happened. Some comments defend me saying I was manipulated and scared, but those get drowned out by the angry ones demanding to know why I didn't notice anything sooner. My phone buzzes constantly with notifications and friend requests from people I don't know. I make my accounts private, but the damage is already done. My name is out there connected to this case forever. I stop reading the notifications because each one makes my chest tight and my breathing shallow. I deactivate Facebook and Instagram completely the next morning, then Twitter and everything else where people can find me. I send my HR department a formal notification about the online attention and potential media interest in case reporters start calling the office. My boss schedules a video call that afternoon, and her face on screen looks sympathetic but worried. She says she supports me through this difficult time, but has concerns about me being a distraction in the office right now. Other employees have seen the news coverage, and there are questions about the company being associated with the case. We agree I should take a mental health leave for at least a month while things settle down and hopefully blow over. She's genuinely kind about it, but I can read the subtext that they want me gone until I'm not a liability anymore. I'm grateful for the leave because I can't imagine sitting at my desk pretending to work while this is happening. But I'm also terrified about money and what happens if this drags on longer than a month. Layla calls 3 days into my leave, and her voice on the phone makes my stomach hurt before she even speaks. She says the older girl has been opening up more in therapy sessions and mentions something that I need to know about. Apparently, Terrence told the girls that someone sick lived outside their room and needed quiet to recover from an injury. That's why they had to stay silent during the day and couldn't make noise or try to get help through the window. My fake injury literally became part of the story he used to control them and keep them compliant. Layla's voice is gentle when she tells me this, but I can barely hear her over the ringing in my ears. The girls were suffering in silence, partly because they thought they were helping me get better. I thank Layla for telling me and hang up before she can hear me start crying. I sit on the motel bed for an hour, just staring at the wall, trying to process how my stupid lie to avoid helping with renovation became a tool to keep children captive. In my next session with Luis, I tell him about what Layla said, and he sees me starting to spiral into self-hatred again. He redirects me toward writing an apology letter to the girls that takes real accountability without making it about my feelings or need for forgiveness. We work on draft after draft, cutting out anything that centers my guilt instead of their experience. The letter needs to acknowledge what I failed to do without burdening them with my emotional process. Luis explains the letter is for them, not for my absolution, and they may never want to read it at all. That has to be okay. We spend 2 sessions getting the letter right, and then Luis contacts the victim advocate to review it and decide whether passing it along through Layla is appropriate. I have no idea if the girls will ever see it, but writing it helps me focus on what I owe them rather than just drowning in shame. The HR approval for my mental health leave comes through under FMLA, but it's only paid for the first week. After that, I'm on my own financially, and my savings account is pathetic. I pull up my bank app and do the math on rent, therapy copays, and basic expenses like food and gas. I'll be in serious trouble within a month, maybe 3 weeks if something unexpected comes up. The motel is eating through money at $60 a night, and I can't keep staying here, but I also can't face apartment hunting yet. I look at my credit card balance and feel sick knowing I might have to start putting groceries on it soon. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm worried about money when those girls lost weeks of their childhood, but the stress is real and immediate anyway. My landlord sends a formal letter 2 days later offering to let me break the lease with just 1 month penalty instead of the usual 2-month fee. It's generous given the circumstances, and I know he's probably just trying to get the apartment back on the market without the stigma of what happened there. But 1 month rent is still $1,200 I don't have sitting around. I feel resentment rising in my chest that I'm losing my home and my savings because my roommate turned out to be a predator. Then immediately I feel disgusted with myself for even thinking about my minor financial inconvenience compared to what those girls went through. They lost everything and I'm complaining about breaking a lease. I sign the paperwork agreeing to the penalty and start planning how to pack up an apartment I can barely stand to enter anymore. I book the movers for Saturday morning and drive back to the apartment with a dozen empty boxes from the hardware store. The key feels heavy in my hand when I unlock the door. Everything looks the same but feels different, like the walls absorbed what happened here and won't let go. I start in my bedroom, throwing clothes into boxes without folding them, just wanting to get this done. The movers show up early, 2 guys who clearly know what happened from the news because they keep glancing at the closed door with the crime scene tape. I point them toward the furniture and they work fast, not making small talk like movers usually do. When I walk into the living room to label another box, I pass the hallway, and my brain flashes back to opening that door, seeing those 2 little girls standing on the stool reaching for the window. My chest gets tight and I have to sit down right there on the floor, breathing through my mouth because I feel like I might throw up. The movers pause and ask if I'm okay. I wave them on and sit there for maybe 10 minutes until the flashback fades enough that I can stand up again. By late afternoon, everything is loaded into a storage unit across town, and I'm standing in the empty apartment with the landlord. He takes the keys and tells me the place will be listed again next month after they repaint. Walking out for the last time, I feel sad and relieved at the same time, like closing a door on something terrible, but also losing the only home I had. Detective Bishop calls Tuesday morning while I'm eating gas station breakfast in the motel parking lot. He says the tech team finished going through Terrence's computer and phone. They found thousands of files, videos from hidden cameras I never knew existed, search histories that made the investigators sick. My hands start shaking so bad I almost drop my coffee. He asks if I'll give permission for them to image my laptop and phone to verify I wasn't involved in any of it. The question hits me like a punch because it means they have to check. They have to make sure I'm not part of this. I say yes immediately. Tell him he can look at everything. I want them to see I didn't know how bad it was, even though I should have figured it out sooner. He says to bring my devices to the station that afternoon, and they'll have them back in a few days. When I hang up, I sit in my car staring at nothing, thinking about how Terrence was recording everything, and I was just playing video games 20 feet away. The tech who takes my laptop and phone is professional and doesn't make eye contact much. I sign forms saying I consent to the search and leave feeling like everyone in that building thinks I'm guilty of something. My next therapy session with Lewis is Thursday, and I show up early, sitting in the waiting room picking at my cuticles until they bleed. When he calls me back, I tell him about the forensic evidence, about giving up my devices, about signing the lease termination. Lewis listens, and then shifts the conversation to practical steps for the new apartment I found, a studio across town with good locks and no roommates. We work through a safety plan together, check all the locks when I move in, install a simple camera pointed at the door, set boundaries with neighbors about privacy and noise, keep emergency numbers saved in my phone. It sounds basic, but writing it down makes me feel slightly less like I'm drowning. Lewis explains this isn't about fixing everything or making the guilt go away. It's about building basic stability so I can function day to day. We practice what I'll say if people ask about what happened. Short answers that are honest but don't invite more questions. By the end of the session, I have a list of concrete actions that feel manageable. Not good, but manageable. A DA Rich calls Friday afternoon and her voice is all business. She says Terrence's lawyer is pushing hard for a plea deal now that the forensic evidence is so overwhelming. Going to trial would mean the girls have to testify about what happened in that room. A plea deal would guarantee prison time, probably around 20 years, plus sex offender registry and no contact with minors after release. Trial means risking a jury, could get more time or could get less depending on how things go. She asks my opinion as a witness, but makes it really clear the decision is about what's best for the girls, not about me getting to see him face consequences publicly in court. I think about those hollow eyes and tell her whatever spares them from having to relive it is the right choice. She thanks me and says she'll be in touch about next steps. After we hang up, I realize I wanted a trial, wanted to watch him get torn apart by prosecutors, but that's selfish compared to protecting 2 kids from more trauma. The frustration sits in my chest like a rock. Through Layla, I arranged to drop off a children's book for the girls the following week. I spent an hour at the bookstore looking for something hopeful, but not preachy, finally picking one about a girl who builds a fort and feels safe there. At the CPS office, I hand it to the receptionist, and Layla comes out to thank me in person. She mentions the girls are doing better than anyone expected, working with therapists, settling into their foster home. While we're talking, I glance through a window into a meeting room and see them sitting at a table with an older woman, laughing over a card game. The younger one is making exaggerated faces, and the older one is giggling in a way that sounds like an actual kid, instead of someone trying to stay silent so the sick person outside won't be disturbed. It's the first time I've seen them look like regular children instead of prisoners, and something in my chest loosens just a tiny bit. Layla notices me watching and gently moves to block my view, reminding me they need privacy to heal. I nod and leave quickly, sitting in my car for a few minutes before driving back to the motel. 6 weeks after the arrest, ADA Rich calls to tell me Terrence accepted the plea deal. 20 years in state prison. Sex offender registry for life. No contact with minors after release. There won't be a trial. No chance for him to stand up in court and minimize what he did or blame anyone else. She says it's a strong outcome that protects the girls from having to testify and relive their trauma in front of strangers. I thank her and hang up feeling relieved it's over, but no sense of victory or satisfaction. Just this exhausted acceptance that he'll be locked up and the girls won't have to face him again. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel much of anything except tired. That night I sleep better than I have in weeks. Not because I'm happy, but because at least this part is done, and I can stop waiting for the next phone call or court date. I move into the studio apartment the next week with help from a couple guys I hire off an app. It's small, but the locks are solid and there's no roommate to worry about. I set up the security camera Lewis suggested, pointing it at the front door so I can check my phone and see if anyone's been there. The first few nights I barely sleep, jumping at every sound from the hallway, but gradually it gets easier. I pick up part-time remote work doing data entry for a company that doesn't ask questions about my background. The pay is terrible, but it covers rent and groceries. I keep going to therapy every week, and Lewis helps me work through the guilt without letting me wallow in it. One afternoon, I text Susan asking if she wants to grab coffee, and she agrees. We meet at a place halfway between our old building and my new apartment. She's kind but honest, telling me how hard it was to watch me ignore all the signs she pointed out. How she almost called the police herself, but talked herself out of it because maybe she was wrong. We're not friends exactly, but there's mutual respect now, an understanding that we both could have done more. When we part ways, she hugs me and says she's glad the girls are safe. 3 months after everything started, I'm functioning but definitely changed in ways I'm still figuring out. I found a volunteer training program for people who want to help recognize and report signs of abuse and trafficking. The classes are twice a week in a community center basement with about 15 other people who all have their own reasons for being there. We learn warning signs, how to report suspicions properly, what resources exist for victims. The instructor is a former social worker who has seen everything. During one session, she talks about how the hardest part for a lot of people is accepting you can't undo the past. You can only commit to doing better moving forward. I think about the 3 weeks I wore that fake sling while Terrence built his prison 20 feet away. About all the receipts and purchases and locked doors I explained away because confrontation felt too hard. I can't fix that or take it back, but I can make sure I never freeze like that again. Maybe I can help someone else trust their instincts before it's too late. The instructor asks if anyone wants to share what brought them to the training, and I raise my hand, my voice steady when I start talking. And that's the full story. I love when a simple moment turns into something we can actually learn from. If this one gave you even a small shift in perspective, then it did its job. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.